Hello everybody and welcome to this video. I don't usually do videos on a weekend. I do try and give myself a break and even play some games for fun, but there has been a talking point that has cropped up over the last week, and it does fall heavily into the discussion around games as art, so I figured that I should do something about it and talk about it while it is still fresh in people's minds. I am of course going to be talking about Harry Potter. So as anybody who has been following the gaming news knows, as part of Sony's big showcase into what to look forward to with the PlayStation 5, the upcoming Harry Potter game from Avalanche Studios was there, and it was a big part of the presentation. As anybody who follows the news in general knows, the author behind Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, has become an incredibly controversial figure for her outspoken and really quite harmful views on trans people. What's more, she's got a book that she's just released in which she's decided to put the fire out by throwing a gallon of petrol on it. The book has been read as being very anti-trans by a wide cross-section of the literary and popular culture world. And so, with the creator of Harry Potter being so repellently unpleasant to a large number of people in the gaming community, there has been a conversation that has popped up about what we should do about this game. There have been all kinds of arguments thrown around. Some people are arguing that by supporting the game and giving money to Rowling, you are therefore supporting hate speech. Some people are saying that by not buying the game, you'll be hurting the developers, many of whom are just trying to put food on the table during a difficult economic climate. Still others are making some claim about death of the author and saying that a work can be judged distinct from the author and the author's intent. So I'm going to run through a couple of those thought bubbles because, as per usual with this industry, there's nuance there that's been overlooked, and whether you end up buying the game or not, it helps to have a more solid understanding of the issues at play than whether you want to support capitalism or not. But we will start with the capitalism arguments because I think this is very much the wrong way to be thinking. But of course, gamers have allowed themselves to be turned into cheerleaders for capitalism, and that's all they can talk about with regards to video games, their financial support of them, so it is the best place to start. So firstly, on an individual level, it does not matter whether you buy a game or not, whatsoever. While video games are now becoming more expensive, and as we found out last week, we are going to be spending a little bit more for the next generation, with a new game costing $120 in Australian money, where previously it was $100. Even with that extra $20 that you are spending, or whatever the equivalent is in your local currency, your decision to buy a game or not is not going to move the needle. It is not going to keep game developers in business. It is not going to support J.K. Rowling's wealthy lifestyle. Unless you are actively convincing other people to also not buy a game, i.e. you're organising or participating in a formal boycott campaign, then your personal decision to buy a game or not is just not going to do anything. On top of that, the people that you think you are supporting with that purchase are not the people that you're actually supporting with that purchase. A lot of people don't seem to understand where their money goes when they make a purchase of a video game, but it is not to the developers. Game developers do not earn royalties from game sales. Some may have a bonus structure tied in terms of how well a game sells, so if it hits a certain number then they get a bonus. But again, unless you are organising a boycott or you are making a protest purchase of a lot of games, or joining together with some other people to buy a lot of copies of a game, your one individual purchase isn't going to affect that, nor is it going to affect it if you choose not to make that one individual purchase. Game developers in the big studios earn a salary that is drawn from a lot of different game sales, assets and business decisions, and so you're not directly supporting a game developer when buying the game, in the same way that if it is the indie space we're talking about, you are directly supporting a developer by buying a game and giving them money. It just does not work in the same way. Secondly, you are not directly supporting J.K. Rowling in purchasing a Harry Potter game. In most cases, the licensing deal for these things involves some kind of upfront payment for the rights to the property. There may or may not be royalties involved as well, though if there are, the amount per unit will be absolutely minuscule. In other words, Rowling has already made her money from this game, and that's whether it sells one copy or a billion. Effectively, you've actually already supported this deal if you have spent money on Warner Brothers products at all in the last decade. Because what has actually happened is Warner Brothers has taken some of its capital and invested that in obtaining the rights to the property in the hope that they will make money from that investment at the other end. That money that they've actually invested in the license came from any number of other sources, but it came from the money that Warner Brothers has acquired from its customers leading up to that point. So really, I don't believe that financial support is something worth discussing in the context of this game and whether you should support it or not. Whether you buy the game or not has no effect whatsoever on the game developers nor J.K. Rowling, and therefore your decision to buy the game or not should not be concerned about whether one or the other will benefit from that money that you are spending. What is much more relevant is the intellectual support of the property. And this is where things become much more interesting and worthy of discussion. Is it acceptable to experience an artwork that has the involvement of somebody that you find abhorrent? Is it okay to be entertained by it, to discuss it, and therefore propagate it in the broader conversation around the arts? There are a lot of angles here. Firstly, there is death of the author to consider, the Barthes essay that people love to roll out every time an artist is controversial. I will say that a lot of people have a very limited understanding of that essay, and Barthes wasn't actually arguing that who an artist is so completely irrelevant to the artwork that you can just ignore them every time it is convenient to do so. But there is still an element of Barthes in this discussion. You should be able to look at a work of art on its own internal merits, irrespective of the role the artist's background had in making it. That is particularly true when Rowling's involvement in the game isn't that much more than having created the setting. There are a lot of different creative ideas and artists that have contributed to this Harry Potter game, and their own creative visions and contributions should be seen as relevant to this game as a work of art. Secondly, the idea that you can only experience artworks that you find morally palatable is very strange to me, and it's strange because one of the key roles of art is to challenge and generate discussion, and I actively seek out art that I won't agree with in order to better understand it. So for the most obvious example that I can think of, Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand is a monster, and her ideology has driven some of the most toxic ideas into the mainstream of Western society. I have, however, read her work because how the heck else am I going to disagree with it unless I understand it? If I haven't read it, I can't exactly argue against it. Another example is a Japanese author named Mishima, who I absolutely love as a writer. His words are some of the most beautiful that I've ever read in literature, and he was actually considered for a Nobel Prize in Literature on 3 separate occasions. He is considered one of Japan's greats in literature, along with Soseki and Dazai. Mishima was a far right-wing nationalist who actually formed a militia and attempted a coup on the government. As a person, he is as repellent as they come to me, and I certainly don't agree with the thesis of many of the arguments that he outlines in either metaphoric way or literal way in his books. But those books are still beautiful and they have literary value. These are not mutually exclusive things. You can disagree with something that you can also appreciate on other levels. And for one final really good example for me personally, Roman Polanski. Yes, Roman Polanski, I am a big fan of his films. What he did was absolutely reprehensible, and I'm not going to go into it. You can easily Google search this up for yourself. He is a reprehensible person. But he has also produced more masterpiece films than just about any director living or dead in history. His films have amazing value and they should be absolutely watched. But they should be watched with a full understanding of who Polanski is and what he did. The point here is it is fine to find a work of art interesting, challenging, uncomfortable, unpleasant, upsetting, excellent, or entertaining. It can be any of those things, or it can be a combination of those things. It is a broad spectrum, and that is the point of the arts. Your analysis of that work of art can also be because of the role of the author, or despite it. You can like a work of art that is made by a despicable person. You can dislike a work of art that is made by a despicable person, but still feel like you should experience that work of art for whatever reason. The idea that you must approve of a work of art, and you must also approve of the author of that work of art before you can experience it, is deeply problematic to me, because it assumes that the only role of art is to entertain and make you feel good, and that cannot be the role of art if art is going to have any value to our society. Now, with all of that said, it is also important that people understand that if somebody doesn't want to play a game for whatever reason, then not only are they allowed to not play the game, but they are also allowed to say why they don't want to play it. That's a really important part of the discussion of art too. What a culture values as art is fluid and reflective of the values of that society. Rowling is certainly not the first author to have her work reassessed and found to be on balance and negative to society. Look at the texts that were once celebrated as literature canon that have since rightfully been relegated to the periphery, like Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness or the Gone with the Wind film. You can still study and appreciate the elements of those works that have made them classics, but you should be only doing so in the context that these works of art now exist outside of social tolerance, because the social tolerance or lack thereof is relevant to the analysis of those works of art. The exact same thing goes for Rowling and this new Harry Potter game. You can play it, and you may very well enjoy it. You don't need to feel like there's any moral failing for spending money on it, because the idea that you are financially supporting the problem does not bear out. You're really not, even if you buy the game at full price on day one. With that being said, you should, however, be very aware of what the existence of the game means and that's how art actually works. Because J.K. Rowling is very much like Ayn Rand. She is a terrible writer with terrible ideas, and if you leave that unchecked, then they become far too influential, and the next thing you know, an entire country has based its entire culture around those terrible ideas. Anyhow, that has been quite the long video. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do click the like and subscribe button if you enjoy my videos, that way you will not miss one. And please do consider throwing me $1 a month on Patreon. Your support will help me to continue to grow this channel as an alternative voice, and I am out there trying to be somebody that's championing the idea that video games have artistic merit and should be treated as such. Stay well, everybody, and we will see you next time.